Hi everybody, Susan Storm here. Today I want to talk about the INFP personality type. If you are not sure if this is your best fit type or if you're trying to help someone else understand their personality type, this is a great place to start. I am an MBTI practitioner and also the founder of a website called psychologyjunkie.com. You can find out way more there about the personality types as well. So let's start with those letters. INFP, what do those mean? How can you understand them? Because at first it can seem confusing. The I in INFP stands for introverts. Introverts have energy that flows inward towards thoughts, ideas, and reflection. Because their energy flows inward, they need a great deal of time alone to understand how they feel or think about things. The N in INFP stands for intuitive. INFPs are interested in the world beyond the tangible. They're interested in ideas, possibilities, potential, the things that could be more than what currently exists. Next, the F in INFP stands for feeling. INFPs, when they have to make a decision, trust their heart to guide them. They trust their inner sense of right and wrong and their values to lead them in the right direction. The P in INFP stands for perceiving. INFPs like to have an exploratory approach to life rather than to approach life with a really regimented plan. So this is just a really brief look at what the INFP stands for. We want to get deeper than this, so we're going to look at the cognitive functions. The cognitive functions are like mental tools that you use to understand the world around you, to guide other people, to take care of other people, to be taken care of. These are the tools you use to sort through information and figure out what you're going to prioritize. So the first cognitive function of the INFP is called introverted feeling. This is their dominant function. And what that means is that this is the function that comes most naturally and is most valued by them. It tends to be as simple for them as breathing. That said, if an INFP grows up in a situation where their dominant function is disrespected or undervalued in some way, it can become undernourished and it can be more difficult for them to access. So the dominant function for INFP is introverted feeling, or FI for short. Introverted feeling asks, am I living in accordance with my values? Am I doing what I think is right? It also asks, what matters to me ultimately? And not based on what matters to everyone else or what everyone else says is right or wrong or what society dictates, but what matters to me as an individual. This is what INFPs really pay attention to. INFPs listen to their own feelings and they're deeply affected by them. They feel that their emotions are going to give them clues about what's really right or wrong for them in life. It's very important for introverted feeling types to live a life of authenticity. So before they just do what everyone else is doing or give into peer pressure or subscribe to the social norms and constructs that everyone else follows, they're going to ask, if I do this, is it because I really want to? Is it because it really feels natural to me? Or am I just doing this because that's what everyone else my age does, or because this is what my parents told me to do? And because of this, they can seem sometimes rebellious because they question the values that are passed down to them rather than just accepting them wholeheartedly. They don't say, my parents are telling me to do this, therefore it must be good, or my religious institution is telling me to do this, therefore it must be good. Instead, they have to ask, do I individually really feel like this is the right thing for me to do? If I do this thing, will it feel authentic to me? What's my heart telling me about this? What can I understand more deeply about this to know that it's the right step? Oftentimes we talk about thinking perceiver types being argumentative, but also feeling perceiving types can have an argumentative streak. If they feel like someone is telling them who to be, what values to follow, or just to do something because someone else says it's right, and they can actually have a very argumentative streak that shows up during these times. Introverted feeling is also a function that processes deeply in isolation. Introverted feeling types tend to process their emotions most deeply when they're on their own. When they're outside with other people, they tend to lean more on their intuitive side to explore possibilities and ideas. But on their own, that's when they can really process and understand what's going on under the surface for them, what their feelings are telling them, what their heart is telling them. They need a lot of alone time in order to do that, in order to make sure that they're living in tune with their values. Because introverted feeling is such an internal function, it's not very obvious on the outside. Yes, INFPs are feeling types, but you may not see them being wildly expressive. We often think of feeling types as being these really effusive, emotional people. And INFPs can be, but most of the time they'd rather be emotional on their own than with other people. Their feelings tend to be very private and personal to them, and they're very protective of them. Carl Jung, who in many ways is the founder of psychological type, who wrote the book Psychological Types, said this about introverted feeling. He said, "Still waters run deep" is very true of these types. He said they are mostly silent, inaccessible, and hard to understand. He also said that they have feelings that are deep but seldom expressed because inner tenderness and passionate conviction are both masked by reserve and repose. So INFPs tend to have this very warm feeling, emotional, sentimental, passionate side. But on the outside, they may actually look very reserved and quiet and hard to read. Many people think of them as seeming mysterious or even confusing to read on the outside. But that's because their feelings, their depth of emotion is internal, as opposed to an extroverted feeling type, like a feeling judging type, where those feelings tend to flow out of them towards people in their environment. The introverted feeling type, that depth of feeling flows inward and gets deeper and deeper, and it's more likely to come out when they're alone, and that's when they can really awaken those really intense, rich feelings. Next, let's talk about the INFP's second or auxiliary function. This is called extroverted intuition, or NE for short. Extroverted intuition is all about exploring possibilities, connections, and patterns in the outside world. This is the function that you're more likely to see when you're interacting with an INFP. It's a part of them that likes to brainstorm and think of 5 or 6 different ideas at a time and jump from one idea to another idea and really explore them in depth, but also being excited by branching those ideas out into more and more possibilities. Because introverted feeling is a very intense, deep function, and because it's very much about making a value judgment, extroverted intuition is very important to pair alongside that, because if the INFP didn't have extroverted intuition, it could form really staunch, rigid judgments without being open to other points of view or other possibilities. But because INFPs have extroverted intuition, they enjoy seeing other possibilities, hearing about the ways other people live and how other people believe. Extroverted intuition, Personality Hacker calls this function exploration, and I really love that word for it because it's all about exploring new and novel ideas, possibilities, theories, patterns, connections. And so this is the part of the INFP that keeps them open-minded and keeps them from becoming too rigid or too strict in their personal beliefs that they can't understand another point of view. Extroverted intuition is something that gives INFPs a very resourceful and optimistic attitude. It can help them bring their ideas into fruition. It can help them connect with others through exploring ideas, through seeing potential in people or potential in the world around them. Extroverted intuition can look at a tree and see 15,000 different things to do with it, from building a tree house, to building a nature swing on the tree, to building a fairy garden around the tree, to creating trellises or vines that branch off the branches. It's always interested in finding new exploratory ways to bring some idea or potential to fruition. And this is the part of the INFP that likes to experiment, to innovate, to think outside the box, to do things in new ways. Extroverted intuition is always interested in doing something in a novel way or a new way or an original way than following the book and doing it exactly the way it's always been done. It's the part of the INFP that questions, why don't I mix it up? Why don't I press the button? Why don't I go this other way that everyone else is going? It's also the part of them that is interested in understanding people from different walks of life or people who may have different opinions or ideas about things. Unhealthy INFPs tend to be a bit out of touch with their extroverted intuition, and because of that, they can form very rigid, judgmental, or even self-righteous beliefs about things. But INFPs who are in touch with extroverted intuition are questioning of things. They want to explore more, and even if they believe something, say they have a certain religious belief, they're still curious about why other people believe what they do. What are the insights they can gain from conversations with people with different perspectives? And they take this questioning, exploratory, open-minded approach, and they pair that with their introverted feeling, so that even if they maintain their same beliefs, they're still open-minded and compassionate towards people from many different walks of life. So the extroverted intuition combined with their introverted feeling can create a person who is deeply empathetic to many different types of people, who is curious about many different walks of life, and who, while living in accordance with their values and living with integrity, is not quick to judge other people who may not have the same opinions as they do. The tertiary or third function for the INFP is called introverted sensing, or SI for short. Introverted sensing is about your subjective impression of literal things, and it's also concerned with comparing and contrasting the past to the present and trying to create traditions and routines and special rituals that preserve the past. Let me give an example because it can sound in some ways a little bit confusing. An INFP who has introverted sensing might look at a book, and the book was a story that they used to read when they were a child. And instead of seeing the book for what it is, they're not interested in reading the book again. It was a childhood book. They're way above that level now. They're adults. They're reading complex books, but they see the book and they think, this book will bring me back this experience I had as a child. It will bring back this feeling I had as a child. Just having the book will be almost magical in a way. It'll be almost like time traveling because this book will awaken these same feelings I had as a child. They associate this book almost with a place in time, a chapter in time that has real significance. And so they end up getting the book, but the book isn't just the book. It's not just the concrete thing. It's a memory, it's an experience, it's a feeling that they used to have when they were younger. INFPs and types that have introverted sensing tend to imbue a lot of meaning onto objects because the object harkens to something from their past or it has some sentimental value. And the introverted sensing of the INFP tends to create a lot of sentimentality towards objects that have a particular meaning. I know quite a few INFPs who hold on to movie tickets and keep them because those movie tickets remind them of special chapters in their lives and special moments that they don't want to forget. Even though introverted sensing isn't the most powerful function for the INFP, it still has a special place for them. It's a place they like to settle in and get playful. But it may not be something that they share with everybody. For example, if you only vaguely know an INFP, they may not share with you their collection of children's books that they've kept all these years. So they may not decide to rewatch The Lion King with you, even though on their own they might do that, or with their closest friends, because they might think, that person's going to judge me for that because this is like a children's movie. Now, it doesn't mean that INFPs only like things that harken back to their childhood, but what it means is that they like things that have special meaning from their past, and they like things that have a sentimental attachment to. The dark side of introverted sensing is that it can also play out in negative ways. Many INFPs talk about replaying negative experiences from their past over and over again, especially embarrassing experiences. So SI, introverted sensing, has a way of reintroducing past experiences to the mind over and over again, and sometimes they're positive, but sometimes they're negative. It's that when you're trying to sleep and all of a sudden you're like, remember that weird, embarrassing thing I did when I was 12? And then you play through it in detail, and it's not just about this thing happened. You are remembering the physical sensations of it. You're remembering every physical detail of that experience. And so this can be a real challenge for INFPs sometimes because they can feel overwhelmed by negative past memories. And that's when extroverted intuition really needs to come into play, because extroverted intuition is the part of the INFP that protects them and nurtures them. And this part of them says, you know what, so what if you did something when you were 12? Let's focus on the future. What did you learn from that? And what can you take from that into the future? We all have to mess up and make mistakes in order to learn new things. That's what extroverted intuition is so good at. Take that risk. Try that thing. Yes, you might regret it later. You might make a mistake, but you'll have learned something new and you will have explored some new territory. So INFPs, when they're in the grip of introverted sensing and they're feeling really plagued by negative memories, or they're feeling really worried about new possibilities or things that could maybe be dangerous, that extroverted intuitive side, when they wake that up, can help them to make peace with risk and help them to make peace with mistakes, and it can help them to move on towards new potential and new aspirations rather than getting weighed down in the past. Because extroverted intuition is very much about leaving the past behind, adventuring into the unknown. And introverted sensing is very different from that. It's about holding on to the past and preserving it. So for INFPs, that introverted sensing side might want to hold on to that negative past memory and not let it go because it feels that there's something really wise about doing that. But extroverted intuition is let it go. Let's keep exploring. Let's keep trying things and making mistakes. Next, let's look at the INFP's inferior function. So the inferior function tends to feel out of reach. It's something that many of us aspire to use really well, but it often feels like we can't quite get a grasp on it. Many of us feel a lot of uncertainty and vulnerability around our inferior function. For INFPs, the inferior function is extroverted thinking, or TE for short. Extroverted thinking is about organizing and structuring the world around you to achieve objectives. It's about having a very impersonal, objective approach to decisions. Rather than focusing on your heart and what it's telling you to do, it's focusing on logic and weighing the pros and cons and looking at the overall strategy of how you can get from point A to point B. Extroverted thinking is also concerned with efficiency and effectiveness and getting things done as quickly as possible. It's got a very decisive, time-conscious focus to it. For INFPs, this side of their personality can feel really awkward. Yes, INFPs can be logical. I've known quite a few INFPs who had jobs as scientists. I've even known an INFP mathematician. They can be very intelligent, logical people, but they're guided by their heart in those endeavors. It's about understanding and exploring. Many times when they have these jobs in science fields or mathematics fields, what they're excited about is the discovery and the exploration, or using their knowledge to do something meaningful to them that aligns with their introverted feeling side. But really organizing people to get a job done, staying on track to complete a task on time, making a decision purely based on logic with no consideration for their personal values. These things can be really difficult for them. It can be hard for them to organize resources to get a job done as fast as possible. It can be difficult for them to delegate and tell other people what to do. It can be difficult to give critique even when it's needed, even when it's constructive critique. It can be difficult for them to problem solve on the spot. These things are all areas that extroverted thinking excels at, but it's an area where they tend to feel more uncertain. If they had to critique someone's work performance, they'd probably feel very awkward and vulnerable doing this. But at the same time, even though this is their inferior function, they can develop it. And many times as INFPs reach 50s, 60s, and beyond, they start to become better at this process. But what happens for many INFPs is this process, extroverted thinking, they tend to ignore it and focus on their other functions because this function tends to feel vulnerable for them. How this could show up is they might come up with ideas and possibilities, but then struggle to bring them to life because they didn't come up with a really structured plan for bringing them to fruition. It can look like avoiding giving criticism when it's actually necessary. And during times of stress, what can happen is extroverted thinking can bubble up and it can take over the INFP's personality in some ways. So typically what happens when an INFP is stressed is they're going to double down on their dominant function of introverted feeling. They're going to need to get away and try to get into their feelings and understand what they all mean. If the problem is ongoing and chronic, then what can happen is they can wear out their introverted feeling process, and then extroverted thinking can take over in this situation. And when this happens, the INFP can flip a switch and start acting a lot more critical, a lot more task focused, a lot more blunt and direct, and sometimes in a way that can really throw people off or even seem hurtful. During these moments, INFPs often feel this rush of frantic energy, this need to accomplish a task, this need to get something done, this need to organize their lives and get everything in place and everything structured. INFPs in the grip of extroverted thinking tend to come across more brusque, more tactless, and more task-focused. This often feels out of control for INFPs, and they usually regret it after they've been in a grip experience. So what's important for INFPs is to have a healthy connection between their introverted feeling side and their extroverted thinking side. What this can look like is when an INFP has a value judgment about something being right or wrong, the extroverted thinking part of themselves can occasionally, they might take a few minutes to ask, but objectively, logically, why is this right or wrong? Let me actually consider the facts and then weigh them in a balanced way to make sure that I'm actually making a logical judgment call and not just a value-based judgment call. It can look like questioning your own beliefs logically to see if they actually add up. It can look like having an idea and getting onto ChatGPT and asking it to help you come up with an action plan to bring that idea to fruition. So extroverted thinking, if you give it little tiny bite-sized moments throughout your day, giving it space to breathe will help it not to flare up and take over when you're in the heat of a really stressful moment. It will also help you to be a more balanced individual as well. But this doesn't mean you should be using extroverted thinking and trying to become like an ENTJ or an ESTJ. It just means consider extroverted thinking when you're making a decision. But first, really lean on your strengths of introverted feeling and extroverted intuition. These are your powerhouses, so definitely lean on those, but also don't ignore introverted sensing and extroverted thinking. Every part of you has the potential to be a really powerful, beneficial part of you. But if you repress or ignore certain parts of your personality, then when they do show up, because they haven't been practiced, because they haven't had space to breathe and you haven't experimented with them, when they show up, they tend to show up in a really immature way. So here are some signs that you are an INFP personality type. 1, you get a sense of rightness or wrongness in your gut. You sometimes just know whether something is right or something is wrong, and you trust your gut and your instincts to guide you in those situations. 2, you crave deep one-on-one relationships. More than a wide breadth of relationships or a giant circle of friends, you want 1 or 2 really close friends where you can get really in depth with them. 3, you process your feelings better on your own than through hashing them out with other people. Your emotions and your feelings run really deep, and you often need to get away from external stimulation in order to really understand them, analyze them, and understand where your heart is guiding you. 4, you love the rush of finding a new idea. You're always looking for inspiration or a spark of possibility in the world around you. And so activities that can give you creative ideas or expose you to new places and people that might broaden your understanding of life are really exciting for you. 5, you believe that not daring to risk is failure. You don't want to just follow the tried and true path. You don't want to follow the prescriptive roadmap that someone else has laid out before you. You want to try new things. You want to march to the beat of your own drum, even if it might invite scrutiny or risk. You want to feel like you are trailblazing a new path in your life. You're going after something original. You're uncovering a mystery. You're searching for the magic and meaning. So I hope this has helped you to understand whether the INFP personality type truly is your best fit type or the best fit type of someone you care about. If you would like to find out more about INFPs, though, there's a lot more on my website at psychologyjunkie.com. I've written over 1,000 articles about the 16 personality types as well as the 9 Enneagram types. So there's a lot of more information there. I will post some helpful links in the description below. And if you have a comment, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks, everyone. Bye.